You paid into Social Security your whole working life. Every paycheck, every year, money taken right off the top. And then you retire. The check finally starts coming, and a handful of states reach in and tax that same check again on the way out. Your own money, taxed twice. But here's the part that changes everything. The list is shrinking, fast. As recently as a few years ago, 13 states were taxing Social Security. In 2026, it is down to just 8. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all 13 of those states, the 5 that quietly stopped taxing your check, and the 8 that still do it in 2026, and exactly where each one stands right now. The 5 states that just dropped off the list and almost nobody noticed. The 8 that still tax it today, and which one reaches the most ordinary middle-class retirees. And the one simple move that protects your entire check completely, no matter what your state does. And do not skip around. An old article scared a lot of good people out of great states for no reason. And number 1 is the one that catches the most retirees, so stay with me all the way to the end. 13 states, where each one really stands in 2026. Real status. I checked it twice. Quick honest note before we start, and please actually hear this one, because it matters more on this topic than almost any other. This is general information, not tax advice, and the list of states taxing Social Security has been shrinking every single year. Thresholds, exemptions, deductions, and credits change annually, and in most of these so-called taxing states, many lower-income retirees pay nothing at all because their income sits under the cutoff. So do not let a scary headline from 3 years ago decide where you spend your retirement. Most of America is already completely safe. 42 states plus Washington, D.C. do not tax Social Security at all. Verify. This is a checklist to verify for your income and your state, not a verdict handed down on a whole state. Treat every number here as a starting point and confirm the current year rule for your own situation before you decide anything. Subscribe if you want the straight story on retirement money, the stuff nobody on cable television will sit you down and explain. 13 states. Let's count it down. Number 13, North Dakota. Back in 1883, a sickly young New Yorker stepped off a train into the Dakota Badlands to hunt buffalo, and the wild, brutal beauty of that country remade him. His name was Theodore Roosevelt, and he later said he never would have become president without his years ranching in North Dakota. Long before him, Lewis and Clark wintered here at Fort Mandan in 1804, riding out a Dakota winter so cold the ink froze in their pens. This is hard, honest, wide-open country, wheat to the horizon, and in modern times the Bakken oil boom that turned quiet prairie towns into overnight fortunes. And here's why North Dakota opens our countdown on the good side of the ledger. Because North Dakota used to tax Social Security, but in 2023, the state eliminated that tax entirely, and now your Social Security check is not touched by the state at all. It came clean off the list. So, if you read an old article that lumped North Dakota in with the states that tax your Social Security, that information is simply out of date. As of 2026, North Dakota is a no-tax state on those benefits. And there is real texture to retirement here beyond the tax win. The cost of living sits reasonable. The Bakken boom built up solid hospitals and infrastructure in a state that used to be all small towns, and the communities are tight, safe, and rooted. The catch is honest, and it is one word: winter. North Dakota winters are long, dark, and genuinely brutal, and that is not a detail you can wave away. But on the single question this video is about, does the state tax your Social Security? North Dakota now answers no. So that is one of 5 states that quietly came off the list. Next, the home of a 5-star general and a little girl swept up in a tornado, a state that dropped its Social Security tax just last year. Number 12, Kansas. In a small Kansas town called Abilene, a boy named Dwight Eisenhower grew up poor, played football, and learned the discipline that would one day make him supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe, and then President of the United States. His boyhood home still stands there today. Kansas is stitched right into the American imagination. It is the home Dorothy aches for in The Wizard of Oz, the dusty heart of the Chisholm Trail, where cowboys drove longhorn cattle north by the hundreds of thousands, and the place where, in Topeka, the Brown versus Board of Education case finally cracked open school segregation in America. Big history for a quiet prairie state, and big news for retirees, because Kansas used to tax Social Security, but in 2024, the state changed its law and stopped taxing those benefits. So as of 2026, your Social Security in Kansas is not taxed by the state. Another one, clean off the list. This one is recent enough that a lot of online lists have not caught up, so let me say it plainly. If a website still has Kansas marked as a Social Security taxing state, check the date, because that changed in 2024. And the rest of the picture is friendly too. Kansas has a genuinely low cost of living, home prices well under the national average, wide open space, and that steady, unhurried plains way of life. You get real 4 seasons, with hot summers and cold, snowy winters, and the wind on the prairie is a constant companion. For a retiree whose biggest fear was watching the state skim their check, Kansas just removed that fear entirely. The honest con is that rural Kansas can be a long drive from major medical care, so location within the state matters. But on our one question, Kansas now says no. That is 2 of the 5. Next, the gateway to the west, where a famous arch reaches for the sky, and a state that also just dropped the tax. Number 11, Missouri. Stand under the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, 630 feet of gleaming stainless steel, and you're standing at the symbolic doorway through which a young nation poured west toward the Pacific. Missouri was the launching pad for the great westward expansion. Down the river in Hannibal, a boy named Samuel Clemens grew up watching the steamboats and, later, as Mark Twain, turned those riverbanks into Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. From Independence, the wagon trains rolled out on the Oregon Trail, and from St. Joseph, the Pony Express riders thundered west, carrying the mail. And in 1945, a plain-spoken Missouri farmer's son named Harry Truman became president and ended a world war. And in our story, Missouri just made a move that matters to every retiree in the state. Because Missouri used to tax Social Security benefits, but in 2024, the state fully exempted them. So, as of 2026, Missouri does not tax your Social Security at all. 3 states, clean off the list. That is a big, recent change. And again, plenty of articles have not updated. Missouri spent years on the taxes Social Security lists, and now it simply does not as of 2024. Verify. The wider picture is welcoming. Missouri has a moderate, very livable cost of living. Real cities in St. Louis and Kansas City with major hospitals and airports, plus the gorgeous Ozark Lake country down south, where a lot of retirees settle for cheap waterfront living. 4 seasons, central location, easy to reach the rest of the country. The honest con is that the big cities carry big city crime stats in spots, so you choose your community with care. But on the Social Security question, Missouri now answers no. Verify. 3 down, 2 to go on the good news list. Next, the birthplace of Arbor Day and the home of one of the richest men on earth. And yes, another state that just stopped taxing your check. Number 10, Nebraska. In 1862, the Homestead Act threw open the Nebraska prairie, 160 free acres to anyone willing to break the tough sod and survive. And the famous Homestead National Monument near Beatrice marks where that great gamble began. It was a Nebraska man, J. Sterling Morton, who founded Arbor Day right here, planting trees to tame the treeless plains. Out on the Oregon Trail, pioneers steered by the unmistakable spire of Chimney Rock rising from the plains. And in Omaha, a quiet man named Warren Buffett still lives in the modest house he bought decades ago. Arguably the greatest investor who ever lived, running an empire from the plains. And Nebraska, fittingly for the home of the world's most famous money mind, just made a smart move for retirees. Because Nebraska used to tax Social Security, but in 2024 the state finished phasing it out. So as of 2026, Nebraska does not tax your Social Security benefits. That is 4 states, clean off the list. Nebraska phased this out over a few years and finished the job in 2024. So once more, if you see Nebraska on an old taxing states list, that list is behind the times. And the life here is solid. Nebraska has good, affordable cities in Omaha and Lincoln, with real hospitals and culture, a low cost of living out in the wide spaces, and that famously friendly, steady Midwestern character. 4 real seasons: hot summers, hard winters. The honest con, same as its prairie neighbors, is the cold and the distance between towns out west. But on our one question, Nebraska now says no. 4 of the 5 are off the list. Next, a state born in the fire of the Civil War, coal country wrapped in green mountains, and the final state to come off the list, fully phased out this very year. Number 9, West Virginia. West Virginia is the only state literally born from the Civil War. When Virginia seceded from the Union in 1861, the mountain counties of the West refused to go. They would not leave the United States, and in 1863 they split off and were admitted as their own state, the only one carved straight out of the conflict. What followed was coal. Deep, dangerous, nation-building coal. Mined by tough mountain families whose story runs through every holler and ridge. This is the land of country roads, of the breathtaking New River Gorge with its great steel bridge, of fog rolling through endless green Appalachian mountains. And West Virginia closes out our good news tier in the most fitting way possible. It is the very last of the 5 to come off the list. Because West Virginia has been phasing out its tax on Social Security over several years, and that phase-out is fully complete in 2026, meaning as of this year, West Virginia no longer taxes your Social Security at all. Verify. 5 states, all 5, clean off the list. This is the freshest change of them all, so it is exactly the kind of thing the old articles get wrong. West Virginia finishes the job in 2026, and your check is now whole at the state level. Verify. And the rest of the value here is genuinely striking. West Virginia carries one of the lowest costs of living in the entire country, with historic homes at prices that sound like typos, gorgeous mountain scenery, 4 real seasons, and warm, deeply rooted communities. The honest con is a slower economy and longer drives to major medical centers from the rural hollows. But on the question this whole video asks, West Virginia, as of 2026, answers no. Verify. And that is the full good news list. 5 states that quietly stops taxing your Social Security. Now stay with me, because this is the part I told you not to skip. Those 5 just came off the list. North Dakota, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and West Virginia, all gone. But there are still 8 states that do tax your Social Security in 2026, and I am counting them down to the one that reaches the most ordinary middle-income retirees in America, the one most likely to actually touch your check. And even here, hold on to this, most of these states have income thresholds and exemptions, so many lower-income retirees pay nothing even in a taxing state. The 8 that still do it. Here we go. Number 8, Utah. In 1847, after a 1,000-mile exodus across the plains to escape persecution, Brigham Young led the Mormon pioneers down out of the mountains, looked across a harsh desert valley by a great salty lake, and reportedly said, "This is the place." They built Salt Lake City out of nothing but faith and irrigation. To the west sits the Great Salt Lake, a remnant of an ancient inland sea so salty you cannot sink in it. And it was in Utah in 1869 that the Golden Spike was driven at Promontory Summit, joining the rails east and west, and stitching the entire continent together for the first time. And Utah is where our second tier begins, the states that still tax your Social Security in 2026. Because Utah does still tax Social Security benefits as of 2026. But, and this matters enormously, it does it through a tax credit system, so many retirees under certain income levels get that tax wiped out entirely. So even on the still taxing list, Utah is gentle for a lot of people. If your income is modest, the credit can erase the tax completely, and you owe the state nothing on your benefits. It is the higher income retirees who actually feel it. So do not cross Utah off your retirement map on this alone. Check where your income lands against the credit. And the life here is spectacular. Utah has some of the greatest national parks on the planet, dry mountain air, low crime, strong family-centered communities, and growing cities with excellent health care. The honest con is that the cost of housing in the popular areas has climbed a lot, and it is not a cheap state anymore. But on our question, Utah says yes, it still taxes, with a big credit-shaped asterisk. That is the first of the 8. Next, the oldest capital city in America, the birthplace of the atomic age, a state that taxes but exempts most retirees anyway. Number 7. New Mexico. Santa Fe, New Mexico has been a seat of government since 1610, making it the oldest state capital in the entire United States, older than the country itself by more than a century. The Spanish, the Pueblo peoples, the Mexicans, and finally the Americans all left their mark on its adobe streets. In the high desert at Los Alamos, in absolute secrecy during World War II, the world's brightest physicists built the first atomic bomb and changed history forever. The painter Georgia O'Keeffe fell so hard for the red desert light here that she spent her life painting it. And out on the plains, a young outlaw named Billy the Kid shot his way into legend. And New Mexico is our number 7 on the still taxing tier, but with a huge caveat. Because New Mexico does still tax Social Security as of 2026, but the state passed a broad exemption that means the large majority of retirees, all but the highest earners, pay no state tax on their benefits. So this is another one where the headline lies to you. Technically, New Mexico is a taxing state, but in practice, most middle-income retirees are fully exempt and owe nothing, and only higher-income households actually pay. Again, check where your income falls before you let this scare you. And the life here is unlike anywhere else. New Mexico gives you that famous high desert light, turquoise skies, world-class art and food, a rich blend of cultures, mild winters in the south, and a low to moderate cost of living in many areas. The honest con is that some rural areas struggle with services and crime in spots, so you choose your town with care, and water is a long-term concern in the desert. But on our question, New Mexico says yes, it taxes, with most retirees exempt. 2 of the 8. Next, the land of Custer's Last Stand and Big Sky Cattle Country, a state that taxes with fewer escapes. Number 6. Montana. In 1876, on a grassy ridge above the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory, George Armstrong Custer led the 7th Cavalry into the deadliest defeat the U.S. Army ever suffered in the Indian Wars, Custer's Last Stand, where he and every man under his immediate command were killed by a massive force of Lakota and Cheyenne warriors. Decades earlier, Lewis and Clark had pushed up the Missouri through this same Big Sky country. To the north rises Glacier National Park, a cathedral of peaks and glacial lakes some call the crown of the continent. And across it all stretches the cattle country that gave Montana its wide-open soul. And Montana lands at number 6 on our still taxing list. Because Montana does still tax Social Security benefits as of 2026, and historically it has taxed them more broadly than some of the gentler states, following the federal model fairly closely. So Montana is one where more retirees actually feel the tax than in, say, New Mexico. Though there are still income-based calculations, so lower-income retirees may owe little or nothing. As always, the rule turns on your specific income, so check the current year math for your situation. And the life here is breathtaking for the right person. Montana is wild, beautiful, uncrowded, with that legendary Big Sky, world-class fishing and hiking, and a fierce, independent spirit. The honest con is the brutal, long winters, the real distance between towns, and a higher cost of living than you might expect in the desirable valleys. But on our question, Montana says yes, it still taxes your Social Security. 3 of the 8. Next, the smallest state in the Union, the birthplace of religious freedom in America, and a state that taxes above an income line. Number 5. Rhode Island. In 1636, a preacher named Roger Williams was banished from the Massachusetts Bay Colony for daring to argue that government had no business dictating a man's faith, and he founded Providence, Rhode Island, as a haven of true religious liberty, the first place in America where you could worship however your conscience demanded. Tiny Rhode Island, the smallest state in the entire Union, was also the first colony to formally renounce its allegiance to the British Crown in 1776. And in the Gilded Age, the titans of American wealth built their staggering summer cottages, palaces really, along the cliffs of Newport, mansions you can still tour today. And Rhode Island sits at number 5 on our still taxing tier. Because Rhode Island does still tax Social Security as of 2026, but it exempts those benefits below a certain income threshold, so retirees under that line pay no state tax on their Social Security at all. So once again, the income cutoff is everything. If your income sits below Rhode Island's threshold, you are exempt and owe nothing on your benefits, and it is the higher earners who pay. Check where you land before you rule the state out. And the life here is rich in its own way. Rhode Island gives you gorgeous coastline, charming historic towns, world-class seafood, and the whole of Boston a short drive away. The honest con is that it is an expensive northeastern state overall, with high housing and property costs, so the cost of living can eat up what the tax break gives back. But on our question, Rhode Island says yes, it taxes, with an income threshold exemption. 4 of the 8. We are halfway through the taxing states. Next, the Gold Rush state high in the Rocky Mountains, with ancient cliff cities and a tax that turns on your age. Number 4. Colorado. In 1858, gold was struck near Pikes Peak, and the cry of Pikes Peak or bust sent 100,000 dreamers stampeding into the Rockies, throwing up rowdy boom towns overnight, some of which became cities, and some of which became ghosts. But people had been living high in this country for far, far longer. At Mesa Verde, the ancestral Pueblo peoples carved entire cities into the cliff faces 800 years ago. Stone villages tucked under the rock that still stand in silent perfection. And above it all soar the Rocky Mountains, the spine of the continent. And Colorado takes the number 4 spot on our still taxing list. Because Colorado does still tax Social Security as of 2026, but it offers a generous age-based retirement income deduction, and for many older retirees, that deduction can shelter their Social Security entirely. So Colorado's tax really turns on your age and income. Once you cross into the older retiree brackets, the deduction can wipe the tax on your benefits out completely, while younger retirees and higher earners may still owe. Check your age and income against the current deduction before you decide. And the life here is famously good. Colorado gives you 300 days of sunshine, the greatest mountains in the lower 48, a healthy, active culture, and excellent big city healthcare in Denver and beyond. The honest con is a stiff one. The cost of living, and especially housing in Colorado, has rocketed up, and it is now an expensive place to retire, which for a lot of fixed-income folks matters more than the tax. But on our question, Colorado says yes, it taxes, with a big age-based deduction. 5 of the 8. Next, the Constitution State, where the first written charter of self-government was born, and a tax that lives above an income threshold. Number 3. Connecticut. In 1639, the settlers of 3 Connecticut river towns wrote down the Fundamental Orders, what many historians call the first written constitution that created a government in the Western world, which is exactly why Connecticut is nicknamed the Constitution State to this day. In Hartford, a restless genius named Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain again, built a wild, ornate mansion and wrote Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn within its walls. This was Yankee country, where whaling ships sailed out of Mystic and where Samuel Colt's factory turned out the revolvers that armed the West. And Connecticut lands at number 3 on our still taxing tier, getting close now to the one that hits the most retirees. Because Connecticut does still tax Social Security as of 2026, but, like several others, it exempts benefits below an income threshold, so retirees under that line owe no state tax on their Social Security. So the pattern holds. Connecticut's lower and middle-income retirees are very often fully exempt, and it is the higher-income households above the threshold who actually pay the tax. Check your number against the current cutoff. And the life here has real appeal. Connecticut offers beautiful New England coastline and countryside, excellent health care, top-tier amenities, and easy access to both New York City and Boston. The honest con is that Connecticut is one of the most expensive states in the country to live in, with very high housing, property taxes, and overall cost of living, so the income threshold exemption is genuinely meaningful here. But on our question, Connecticut says yes, it taxes, with an income threshold exemption. 6 of the 8. Next, the Green Mountain state of Ethan Allen and maple syrup, a state that taxes more broadly than most. Number 2, Vermont. Before Vermont was even a state, it was a fiercely independent republic, defended by Ethan Allen and his rowdy Green Mountain Boys, who seized Fort Ticonderoga from the British in 1775 in one of the first bold strokes of the Revolution. In 1791, Vermont became the very first state admitted to the Union after the original 13. It is the land of Calvin Coolidge, the famously silent Vermont-born president who was sworn into office by his own father, a notary, by the light of a kerosene lamp on the family farm. And it is maple country, where the sap runs every spring and the hillsides blaze impossibly red in the fall. And Vermont takes the number 2 spot on our still taxing list. Because Vermont does still tax Social Security as of 2026, and it has historically taxed benefits fairly broadly, following the federal approach, though it does provide exemptions and phase-outs based on income. So Vermont is one of the states where more middle-income retirees can actually feel the tax. There are income-based exemptions, but the protected band can be narrower than in the gentler states, so the math really matters here. Run your specific income against the current rules before deciding. And the life here is postcard beautiful. Vermont gives you storybook villages, brilliant fall foliage, ski mountains, farm-to-table everything, and a peaceful, slow, deeply rural rhythm. The honest con is that it is cold, it is rural, and it is expensive, a high cost of living and high taxes overall, with long winters and distance from big city services. But on our question, Vermont says yes, it still taxes your Social Security, and fairly broadly. 7 of the 8. And now the one that reaches the most retirees of all. Next, the land of 10,000 lakes, the headwaters of the Mississippi, and the single state on this list most likely to actually tax your check. Number 1, Minnesota. Up in the north woods of Minnesota, at a quiet lake called Itasca, you can wade across a stream barely 15 feet wide and step over the entire Mississippi River at its very source, the mightiest river in North America, starting as something you can hop across. This is the land of 10,000 lakes, settled by hardy Scandinavian and German immigrants who carved farms and iron mines out of the cold. On the Iron Range, the ore that built America's skyscrapers and won its wars was dug from the earth. And in the town of Rochester, 2 brothers and their father built a small clinic that grew into the Mayo Clinic, arguably the most renowned hospital on the entire planet. And Minnesota earns the number 1 spot on this countdown for one sober reason. Because Minnesota does still tax Social Security as of 2026, and it is the state most often cited as reaching the broadest swath of ordinary middle-income retirees, the ones most likely to actually feel it on a typical check. Minnesota has expanded its exemptions in recent years, and lower-income retirees are protected. So this is not a verdict that every Minnesota retiree pays. But of all 8 states still taxing benefits, Minnesota is the one whose reach extends furthest into normal middle-class retirement income, which is exactly why it caps our list. So if you live here, this is the one to truly check against your own numbers for the current year. And this is the whole point of the video. The tax on your Social Security is not some fixed national curse. It is 8 specific states now, down from 13, each with its own thresholds and escape hatches, and it shrinks a little more almost every year. Verify. Pro on Minnesota, a genuinely wonderful state, with the Mayo Clinic, beautiful lakes, strong communities, and excellent services. Con. It taxes Social Security the most broadly of the 8, and it is cold and not cheap. But here is the truth underneath all of it. You worked your whole life for that check. It is not a gift. It is your own money coming back to you. And no honest accounting of your retirement should let an old, outdated headline scare you out of a state that may not even tax you at all. So let me hand you the one move that ends this entire question, completely. Here is the fix, the simplest, cleanest protection there is. If you retire to a state with no state income tax at all, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and a handful of others, then there is no state income tax to tax your Social Security with. The question disappears entirely. No threshold to watch, no credit to calculate, no phase-out to track. Your check is simply yours, every cent, at the state level. But, and please hear this because it is exactly the kind of thing these videos usually skip, you have to weigh the full tax picture, not just the income tax. Some no-income tax states make up the difference with higher property taxes or higher sales taxes. So a state that does not touch your Social Security might still cost you more overall through other taxes. The smart move is to look at the whole bill, income, property, and sales, for the specific town you are considering, not just the one headline number. So there it is, the real story for 2026. Not 13 states draining your Social Security, but a list that has shrunk from 13 down to 8 and is still shrinking. North Dakota, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and West Virginia all quietly gone. And the 8 that remain mostly softened by thresholds, credits, and exemptions that leave many retirees owing nothing at all. Tell me down in the comments, does your state still tax your Social Security? Or did it quietly come off the list and you never even heard? I genuinely want to know which state you are in. And here is your reason to come back. Next week, I'm going to walk you through the Social Security mistakes that are quietly costing retirees thousands of dollars, the simple filing and timing errors that drain real money from people who earned every penny. You do not want to miss that one. Subscribe so it lands in your feed the moment it drops. And one last honest reminder, because it matters most on this topic. This is general information, not tax advice. The list of states taxing Social Security has been shrinking every year. Thresholds and exemptions change annually, and many lower-income retirees are fully exempt even in a taxing state. So verify the current rule for your state and your income before you decide anything.